Oddball show features content intended for mature audiences. If you'd like to view a content warning before listening, please check out the episode description. The views put forth by our hosts and our guest reflect the speaker's opinions and not the official stance of Oddball Foundation. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, it's Jason Wright from Oddball Show, and I'm super excited to have on the show David Reville. Now, David Reville has a very interesting story, but I want to say briefly a little bit about his bio, that he was hospitalized in 1960 and then became an activist to reform mental health care, served on Toronto City's Council in the 1980s, helped develop the augmented education program at George Brown College, which works to get people with mental health and addiction issues employed in the culinary and construction industries. Aside from being a majorly important figure in the development of MAD studies, he's also a singer and has been in choirs throughout his life. We are super grateful to have him on the show. David Reville, welcome to Oddball Show.
Thanks, Jason. It's good to be here.
So David, I just want to ask you a little bit about what it was like for you growing up. So David, take it away. Where were you born? And let's go from there. And I'll try to ask some questions from there.
I was born in Brantford, Ontario, and Brantford is a small city about an hour southwest of Toronto. And the thing that Brantford is famous for is that's where Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player, was born. So otherwise, nobody would know about Brantford. I went to school there, and then I went to university, and I went to law school. And while I was in law school, I had a massive psychotic break of the manic type. And I had no idea that what I was doing was not normal. I was being myself, but I was right out there. And I got taken to see a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist immediately put me into the hospital. And I went voluntarily. I thought, well, they're going to find out this is a mistake. And, I'll be out the door tomorrow. But that's not what happened. And eventually they told me that I had manic depressive psychosis. And they began to treat me with the medications designed to bring you down from a high. And the problem with them is quite often they bring you down so far, you go into depression. And that's what happened to me. So I was in hospital for 4 months, and then you let me out, and I was, so depressed I felt about as tall as a flea. And part of the plan was to leave town, to change my profession, and so we did that. Right, I was now we moved to Kingston, Ontario, which is east of Toronto, and is about 80,000 people, maybe, not a very big place, but had a good university. And however, it did not work for me, this plan. And I again went to the hospital. This time they put me in what you would call a state hospital. Okay. We call it a provincial hospital. And it's state hospital, a pretty rough and ready joint, not very well funded, staff not supremely well trained, and pretty much there was an admitting ward which rotated people in and out, but there was also a chronic hospital where nobody left, right? Oh. And I got sent to the chronic hospital because I was a bad boy. And I could not believe it, what it was like there. And I was there about 1.5 years. And during that time, my life turned into a country song because my wife left me.
I'm
She
sorry.
took my son.
I'm sorry.
I lost my career. I was not. I didn't have a bank account. I didn't have a driver's, like it was a country song.
So it was like
And
a country song. Yeah, yeah.
then and if you play it backwards, I get it all back, right? Um, and so they let me out, and their vocational rehabilitation department was not all that creative, but they got me a job as a pot washer in an industrial kitchen in the university. And the university was being a good guy by providing a placement for a discharged, well, I wasn't discharged yet, for a patient. And what I would do is I would walk down to the university in the morning, and then I would walk back to the university at night. So I was still a patient while I was working. And I eventually realized that the trick was if I could maintain this job for some unknown length of time, they would let me out, and they did. So I got sent to an approved home for 1 month, and then then it was all over. Right, there was no follow up beyond that, and I was either gonna sink or swim or on my own, right? And keep in mind, my wife and son are gone.
How old
I
was your
don't know anybody in this town, right?
how old was your son when he left?
He was a baby.
Really?
Yeah, he was about a year. Yeah,
About a year. Yeah. Wow. That
you
must have been
know.
really tough.
Yeah, I never saw him again.
Oh my God.
Because what happened was eventually I got a divorce,
Mhm.
and her second husband got custody of the child. Right?
Wow.
So that was me done. Um,
Dave, you're
anyway, I
quite a
got out
survivor.
and I uh, spent 5 horrible years um, in sort of entry level jobs, right? Uh, mostly clerical, uh, and they were, oh God, they were boring, right? And I didn't quite know how to behave. Uh, what you were supposed to do was to be on time and to look busy, and I didn't get that for I could get my work done in about 20 minutes, right? Anyway, so that I was not being a success at all. Um, and then this should be a movie, this part. I met a woman who she wasn't happened to be a nursery school teacher, and she was the kind of a hippie. Oh, because now you see we're into the 70s, right? And um, and I then got a job as an apprentice plumber.
Wow.
And guess what? Everybody has busted plumbing, right? And they will. So I would go to work, and then after work, I would go to work because it's called side jobs, right? You would do
Oh,
side
sure.
jobs.
Yeah. Gigs.
And
Yeah, right.
eventually I had enough side jobs. So I quit and I started my own company. And by accident, I had discovered the antidote to my failure as a clerical worker. And the antidote was to be a person learning a trade, which I didn't know how to do, right? I had to learn it. And I got a chance to learn on the job, right? From journeyman. And then I had a skill that was totally marketable, right? And uh, and uh, and then I started hiring some of the people that I used to work with
Oh.
to work in my company, the good ones, right?
So
And
you ended up taking on managerial roles.
yeah, yeah,
Cool. Cool.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, I carried a toolbox for a long time, and the other thing is that while I was doing this, especially when I was my own boss, I could become a community activist, and because I could, go to meetings in the evening. I could go to meetings in the day and just move, change things around. And I've started to meet. Well, the first I met a guy whose name was Don Weitz, and he had been a psychologist at the big mental hospital in Toronto, and he quit because he found the treatments barbaric. Barbaric was the word he used. And he started reading all the books he could find, and he started going to the U.S. to meet Judi Chamberlain, and he went out west to uh, visit these guys that started the Mental Patients Association. And he came back to Toronto, and he said, "I'm going to do that." I said, "Cool." uh, so he did, and he formed a group called On Our Own, and it was named after Judi Chamberlain's book,
Oh my
On Our
God.
Own.
That's such a tribute.
Yeah. Oh, he just admired her so. Um, and I got to work with her several times, and she was so smart. Holy. Anyway, and she, as you know, she worked all her life trying to improve things for people with mental health issues, and she did a lot of stuff. Uh, the so now I was connected to a growing number of people who wanted to do something, and it took quite a while to pull it off. But in 1977, we started this group on our own, and um, part of what we were trying to do was to deal with people's poverty, and so there was a store called the Mad Market, and the goods that we sold were goods that we picked up in affluent neighborhoods on garbage night, right?
Oh,
And we had a pickup truck, right? And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and because I had this plumbing company, I was able to deliver all sorts of used plumbing fixtures. um, and so people were earning some money. They were learning a bit about business, but more importantly, they were starting to have some pride. Oh, could bring me to Mad Pride if you wanted, but that was quite a bit later. Mad Pride started in Toronto in 1993.
1993
Only,
was when Mad Pride started. I thought that started way before then.
well, might have, but in Toronto it started in 1933, and
Wow.
it was, that it had it kind of leveraged off Bastille Day,
Oh, I
which
didn't
is
know that.
which is in July, because when the mob tore into the Bastille, they freed a number of quote lunatics. So that's the connection for Mad Pride and Paris, right?
I
Paris,
never knew
France.
that, David. That's fascinating. Wow.
Yeah. You stick with me, Jason. I'll tell you a thing or
I'm
two.
going to stick with you, David. That was incredible.
Anyway, uh, the, it, things started to happen. Uh, I have a snapshot taken in 1981, and it's a snapshot of 5 people standing on the steps of our legislature. And one of the people is me, right? And 2 of the people are leaders of our movement in Toronto, Pat Capone and what is his name? It'll come to me. They're both dead, by the way. And what we were what we were trying to work on at that point was uh, the housing conditions were
Oh,
so terrible, and it was because the most Western countries started to deinstitutionalize, and that meant closing psych beds, right? And so
Yeah.
they would
Yeah.
just discharge people. And our experience was they would discharge you. They'd give you a piece of paper with an address on it, and you would go there, and they would, if they had a vacancy, they'd give you a room, and the operator would collect your welfare check, right, and give you back $5, and then they would take your meds and they would hand them out at breakfast, not being all that careful who got which ones, and it was really horrible and crummy. And so we were working on that. We were doing a little guerrilla laundromat theater. We had a tent city, right? And so the press thought that was pretty interesting.
Did you make press? Did you make headlines with Guerrilla Laundromat Theater?
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you one we did make headlines as well. Anyway, this one with the 5 people on the steps of legislature was related to bad housing conditions, and over years we managed to improve them. So Pat and I were on the first board of the Supportive Housing Coalition, which was set up specifically to provide decent supportive housing to people coming out of the mental. The other news one was I used one of the city hall committee rooms to host a boarding house lunch, and we invited the mayor and several provincial politicians came because they wanted to beat up on the government, and then all the press came. And what we did, we even had those menus written in French about, and what it said was weak chicken soup is what we were having for lunch. And the mayor actually tried to eat his bologna sandwich, and it was a prop. It wasn't, but that's okay. We didn't. And so it said, we served food for thought was the, and some of the stuff was a joke, right? So there was a woman who went up and down we had all these survivors in City Hall, right? Sitting around this table and causing security to piss its pants, right? But they were all there. And we had a person going from person to person, handing them a little twist of cellophane with Smarties in it. And that was your medication. And there was this sort of byplay of saying, wait a minute, those aren't my meds. Shut up and take them. That sort of. Anyway, so we did that. And those kinds of things are fun. We got a bit of ink. The world didn't change, right? But you build your movement that way. So if a person gets a chance to make a little speech and they've never made one before, well, that's a big day for them, right? And so that's the way that you're starting to try and instill pride in people so that they can come back, right?
Yeah.
And so I spent 5 years on council, and it was a really good time to be there if you cared about mental health because of this deinstitutionalization thing, right? Was ordinary people were just up in arms from 2 points of view. One was, how can you require people to live in such squalor? That's one. And then the other side is, get this garbage off of my street. So
Right.
you have
Not in my backyard, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
And we then worked on a bylaw, which was successful, which said that if you have a group home and it meets these standards, um, you can do it as of right. You don't have to do no zoning, nothing. You put it in, and it was fought tooth and nail, but we won, right? So that's that's good stuff. Um, except when you think, wait a minute, people don't really want to live in a group home, do they? No. Uh, they might want to if they thought it was on the way to something better. You know?
Well,
And for
like, as in like a stepping stone from where they were. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, yeah.
a place to
Um,
heal. You know.
there was a community agency that was set up primarily to provide services to uh, ex-psychiatric patients, and it did some great stuff, right? And it fed a lot of people as well, right? Um, that, of course, is not where you want to end up, right? You want them to be able to feed themselves.
Right, right, right. You want to be able to teach them to live sustainably on their own and make their own
Yeah.
decisions, give people autonomy and let them
Yep.
heal from the psychiatric abuse that
Yep.
they dealt with, you know?
Yep. Um, one of one of the things that made me feel proud uh, was a organization that was entirely run by people with mental health histories, uh, and they decided they were going to do a fundraising dinner for some roomers who had been burnt out of their rooming house, and they pulled it off. It was a great success, and they raised a shitload of money. But they also, the people involved said, wait a minute, we can do stuff that's good. Yeah. So it's important to get that chance to do something that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as I said, I was on the city council for 5 years. Then I got elected to the what we call the provincial legislature, but it would be like the state legislature, right? And again, I was there at the right time. There was mental health legislation coming up that I could work on and improve. Um, and uh, there was a lot of challenges. Um, so there's a group called the Friends of Schizophrenics, and they are the parents of children who have schizophrenia.
Huh.
And their attitude tends to be, we want to make it easier to put people in hospital. When, of course, the consumer survivor ex-patient movement does not want to make it easier, right? So
Right.
we had a lot of those fights, and sometimes we won, sometimes we didn't. But what we did was we had a lot of participation in the uh, public discourse, right? So when they were getting ready to change the Mental Health Act, uh, they sent their minister to our place, right? And we had 100 people there who had a speech to say. And again, that was a proud moment for the movement. And that one was increasingly not exclusively Toronto people. These were people from outside. Uh, what happened in 1991 was the government decided that it was going to fund um, what we call consumer survivor activities. These are organizations that are composed of people with mental health histories, and they decide what they want to do. And they may decide they're going to run a business, or they may decide they're going to run an information service, right? Or they may decide what they want to do is drop-in center, right? So in 91, the government funded 42 organizations, and you can imagine the excitement and what a difference that made to because there were now opportunities to meet provincially and exchange ideas and congratulate each other and do stuff, and it started to spread so that a university professor might decide that he or she wants to work with several of these groups, and they're going to invent a discharge plan. So if you're being discharged, you get a buddy who is a person with a mental health history, and you get matched up so that you get helped with coming back, right? And so the university was studying how this would work, and I think they gave out more than $100,000 for these other organizations to participate. And what they found, of course, was that it was very helpful to people, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I would say to have belief in to have someone else believe in your mission, especially especially when government funds 42 organizations, shows that at least there's an impact here, and that they're in step in the right direction to try and create more opportunities. Am I right here?
You're right, and we were able to get academics to write articles about this, and so it becomes part of the literature. However, over the years, the government kind of loses its enthusiasm, right? It's still funding these things, but it's, there's inflation and whatever, and the people are not getting it. So I can't remember. In terms of my career, so after I was in the legislature, I did another job that I don't need to talk about too much, but I set up as a consultant, and I was asked by the government to look at community mental health. Those would be traditional community mental health, as well as these survivor-run groups. And I reported that that I thought there needed to be a deeper study of the needs of the consumer survivor groups, because some of them didn't look very prosperous to me, right? And it looked to me like they were missing some expertise, or so.
David, can I ask you a question? Sorry to interrupt. Can I ask you a question? Those 42 organizations, were those advocacy organizations, drop-in centers, mobilization, food, all that kind of stuff? And do you think that it fizzled out because some of them just didn't make it, and the government saw that it wasn't viable?
Well, I wouldn't say it has fizzled out. I would say is that some of them fizzled out, right? And some of them did not. So for instance, I was giving a lecture in Scotland the other day, and I was talking about three of these organizations were businesses, and one of them started in 87, one of them started in 89, one of them started in 94. They're all still going. They all are providing jobs. The one organization has got $1.5 million in sales. So fizzled out is not true in respect to those.
So
and
So it sounds like go ahead.
And however, we actually knew this would happen because some of these groups were very much on their own, right? And they were in a kind of a hostile environment. And because the ones in Toronto were closer together, and they're the ones that had the most success. If you were out in the boonies somewhere, uh, it's
It's harder
harder,
to mobilize, right? Yeah, right.
harder to mobilize. Although some came up with great strategies. So what it says to me is that uh, people with mental health experience can indeed do a lot of stuff, but they do need some resources. And in the mental health world, they are not as powerful as a psychiatric hospital, right? They are not as powerful as a big community agency like the Canadian Mental Health Association. And the Canadian Mental Health Association gobbles them up, right? And maybe they still keep going, maybe, but they're different. They're no longer run by us. Right? They're
Right.
run by a social worker or something, right? And that's not the same.
So they kind of
Yeah,
lose their mission a little bit because it's bought
yeah,
up by a
yeah.
by
And
a
the
wider.
other thing that I'm actually worried about, and is I think of the guy who's running Fresh Start Cleaning and Maintenance, right? And he's got 70 employees that he's worrying about, right? And he's got to keep the lights on, right? He's got to deal with his customers. And what if there's a pandemic, right? uh, and so that guy, is he any longer able to be an advocate, to be an activist, or is he a business guy running a business? And so I think we've lost a bit of that edge because of our success, which seems crazy, right? But
So can I ask you a question, David? Can you be an advocate and a business person at the same time and not lose your sense of pureness, not lose your sense of the mission, not lose your sense of your ethos? I believe you can, but do you think a lot of companies start with this goal to be like these companies start with a goal and like you said, it gets complicated and things
what
change
I
and
know to be true, because I know all these people, is they started with a dream.
yeah.
They had a dream and they had guts and they had determination and they succeeded. But now they got to run the thing, right? And
Yeah.
I think it's really hard to do both. Um,
So do you
so
think that what it takes to be an advocate, David, or an activist is just what you said, guts, determination, and a dream?
yeah, you my experience was, I'm sorry, you do need some mentors, right? You need people to help you figure it out. And I was fortunate to have some really good ones, right? Um, and I've tried hard to be a good mentor to others. Um, and however, I got to tell you this: the last summer, a guy escaped from the mental hospital, and the police couldn't find him, and the premier, which is sort of, is it like a governor? I don't know. Anyway, the premier, who is the sort of the head of the legislature, went on a talk show and he started to diss this guy and mental health people in general, right? And and he talked about
What
not,
was he saying that we are we belong in hospitals, that we don't belong in society, we
yeah,
can't hold jobs, we're a resource a waste of resources, stuff like that?
He was he was angry that the hospital had let this guy get away, and that this guy was a killer, and that he was a nutcase, and that he was an animal. He said all those things, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, what the hell is? How the hell does he think he can talk that way, right? And so I went to some of the people in the community that I know well, and they were outraged. And I said, "What are you going to do?" They said, "Nothing. We're going to do nothing." I said, "What?" um, and they believed it if they would threaten their funding.
Yeah.
So I called up what do you call them? There's a weekly kind of entertainment paper that runs some articles, right? I called them up and I said, would you take an article on this? The guy said, sure. So I wrote the article and he published it, right? So somebody at least said that the premier was out of line, and that the things he was saying were not true. Like I was able to go after him, but it worried me that I would have thought that there would have been hundreds of people wanting to do that, and there weren't.
Well,
So
don't you think, David, there's a lot of small fishes out there too, and if small fishes mobilize, they can eat the big fish. Like,
yeah,
isn't it true that I've always seen that picture of one big fish, and then 100 small fishes eating up a big fish. Like, isn't that like possible?
well,
I guess what I'm trying to say there, David,
numbers are
is yeah. Go
it's
ahead.
I think it's much more complicated than that. I think when we make progress, it's because we have uh, found allies, created allies, and made it embarrassing for the powers that be not to do it. And so that's what I think. Um, and I've seen that happen, right? There was another thing. In 1990, the government decided that each of the psychiatric hospitals, the provincial ones, should have a patient council. I was talking about a question I have about whether success in building these organizations has had a negative effect on the amount of advocacy we were able to do, because all of those excellent people are tied up running businesses. Right? And uh, there are some ways to solve that.
Do you think it
But,
has to do with social media and press and
well,
things like that?
yeah, I mean, sure. And you have to keep in mind that I'm coming from the 60s. We didn't have that kind of
Well,
stuff.
well, I
Um,
imagine you had publications,
yeah,
correspondences,
yeah.
things like that,
Yeah,
right?
but I mean, that was difficult too, because you can maybe imagine that many of our members had no phone, right? They couldn't afford a phone. So sometimes they could get the use of a phone at a place they went, and sometimes not. So sometimes if you wanted to get a meeting, you had to go over to where they lived and see if they wanted to come. Yeah. Uh, I don't know where we're at in time. So, oh, I see. Yeah.
We're
Listen,
we're
I did want to talk a bit about mad studies.
yeah. So so David, let's switch gears for a second. I know that
Okay.
we were talking about advocacy, but
Yeah.
advocacy really starts with mad studies, which I know that is something that you are very passionate about, very knowledgeable about. So, David, can you expand on what mad studies is and why that's important for not only us to know, but people to know?
And to me, mad studies is really simple. Is that mad studies is built on the knowledge of people with mental health issues. and it is built as a alternative to what you would call the medical model, which is what you get out of uh, psychiatric associations and universities in the main, is that uh, and we are just beginning to be a player in universities with our MAD studies topic, and it's been really exciting for me to see this begin to happen. It's still a child, right? Uh, but the one that made us all jump up and down was in Edinburgh, in Scotland. The, there is a university called Queen Margaret University, and last year they began to offer a Master's of Science in MAD Studies, and we just about fell on the floor because
Wow.
that's a world first. It has not ever happened before. And what it means is that uh, the discipline is going to be built because people are going to write papers and study stuff and talk to each other. And that's the wonderful thing about being alive today, is that I can write an email and put it on our Mad Studies site, and somebody from Germany will write back to me tomorrow, right? I mean, so that's wonderful.
The global movement.
Yeah, and it's pretty young, right? So um, the first sign of it that I saw was at my university in the year 2000, and um, a man named Jeffrey Rayom, who is a professor, um, came to the school and pitched a course called Mad People's History. And the director of our school said, "Come on!" And he taught it a couple times, and then he was hired by a bigger and smarter university, so there was a vacancy. And that's when I got a call, would I come and teach this? And I said, what is it? uh, but I had some ideas about what it was. And then I taught that. And then I developed another course called A History of Madness, which was what we call a upper level elective, which meant that anybody in the university could take it. So engineers could take it, and fashion designers could take it, and social workers could take it, and nurses, and so there they all are, and they're starting to learn something that nobody else has ever had a chance to learn because it wasn't there, and so that was totally exciting, and I mentored a number of students, and some of them are now becoming professors. So one is a professor at Windsor University, and she's a Mad Studies teacher. One of my students is working on her dissertation, actually working with me on it, because she's going to be writing about these businesses I talked about. And another one who has a PhD now, she's a very interesting woman. She is also a fiber artist. So she is working with a group called Kickstart, which is a disability arts and culture. And so, but she's got a mad spin on it that wasn't there before. And it actually is located in Vancouver, and has all sorts of hot disabled artists involved with it. So this is beginning to happen, right? And it is so exciting to see. And you don't know where it's going because, well, just because you don't, right? But so the Mad Studies Facebook group has 2,500 members, and they are from all over the world. And I'm talking to people from India who are, and they're writing about this and that, and then they want to get a hold of this and that. And there's all this exchange, which is going to build the discipline. And but I am worried about it to the extent that I don't want it to just stay in the university. I want it to get back out on the street where it can help people with mental health issues. So what I used to do was I used to hold workshops, and I would find funders to pay the fees for people, and then I'd do a little bit of history or whatever, and we would work on it for three days, and I called it talking back to psychiatry, and it was popular, right?
Does it still exist, David?
No, but it could in a minute.
There we go. Now we're talking, David.
No. Look, what I did do recently was there's a what is it called? Each of the universities seems to have a program for seniors where a senior can come and learn something, many topics, right? And they recruit lecturers, and so I pitched them a history of madness, and they bought it, and I went and I had 35 students, and they have to be over 50, I think. And a lot of them didn't like it because I was not towing the party line of psychiatry and whatnot. And so they just sort of pissed off, right? And I thought, I thought I had made it clear what I was going to be talking about, but I guess I hadn't. On the other hand, I have a woman who sends me Facebook messages practically every week, and she was one of the students in that course, so she really did like it. So interesting, huh?
So you affect a change with one person who is still very much in the movement.
Yeah, well,
or maybe more, but
that woman actually, probably more, but that woman, I think she starts off as an environmentalist, judging by what she's interested in, but she's also political. So she's a left winger, and we haven't talked about politics much, but
we haven't, but we could. But yeah,
we don't need to.
it's sometimes
we got other stuff. Right?
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff to talk about, like this mad study.
I just went to a funeral of one of the builders of my party, and I was had an odd reaction. I was sad, and then I was happy to see all the people that I had known, right, and that I hadn't seen for a while. So that was odd, and it actually has been part of this elevated episode I'm having.
Right. Oh, I can totally relate to that on a personal level as well. But we could talk more about that. Let me ask you a question about MAD studies. How many people could it? Well, one thing, is it global? Can someone from the United States get involved with this, and if they wanted to, in Scotland? And how many people would be affected by something like MAD studies if it trickled out into the world?
First of all, I don't know.
It's kind of like a subjective.
If you wanted to enroll in the course in Edinburgh, you could. And I even have a scholarship there with my name on
it. The David Reville Scholarship, beautiful.
Yeah, I know, and it was put together not by me, by friends in Scotland. Isn't that amazing?
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah. Can I ask you a question, David? Do you think that globally there are more progressive places than the United States and Canada, like outside of United States and Canada globally? Do you think there's other
Uh,
movements that are just as strong that could mobilize?
you know what the sad thing is? Uh, Even progressive movements have been bad to people with mental health issues, even progressive movements. And it's because mental illness makes people afraid. And they are afraid that they too might get one or have one, and that makes them doubly afraid. And so uh, that's what you start with, eh? And then uh,
David, can I ask
something
you a
happens.
question?
Yeah,
Do you think there's a caricature of a mentally ill person in the world?
yeah, yeah.
And what to people who are what does a mentally ill person look like to people in the world, would you say, if you were to just think what they think?
They have a machete in one hand and an Uzi in the other.
Jeez. Yeah. You know what, David? I've never had
That's
a
what we're up
machete.
against.
I've never had a machete. I've never had an Uzi. I've
Good.
been a victim of bullying. Of course, I've never been an angel, but I've been bullied more times than you can count, and I've never lashed back in anger. So I really feel like this common or not so common or maybe common view of people with mentally ill, because the people that I talk to on Oddball Show, the people that I'm talking to, like David, I think your story. I don't think you're a machete wielding madman. I think you're incredibly smart and a professor. And I really do feel, for some reason, people have this scary idea of mental health, of
Yeah.
mental illness specifically.
I went to a conference in Egypt. Howie the Harp was there. And I was horrified to learn that people from developing countries in Africa wanted to build mental hospitals and so that they could be like England or like a grown-up place, right? And I'm thinking, no, guys, you do not want to do that. Right? Let me tell you what we are having to do now, right? Yeah, but I imagine they went and built them. Yeah,
But then I think there's like tribal tribes in South America and stuff. Well, I have no idea. I've never really been to South America, but I always think of the idea of the shaman or the someone
yeah,
with the mental
yeah,
health issue that is regarded as a chief of the village for their knowledge. And then you
yeah,
see someone who might be hearing voices in I don't know, some place where people are walking over them.
yeah.
Or then there's some people who are hearing voices or having a
Uh,
podcast. So
I, I,
tomato, tomato.
I think that the danger, Jason, is uh, you can get sort of frozen by trying to sort out some of this stuff, right? So, there's a shaman. Well, great. you know, um, or is the shaman your psychiatrist, right? Oh, like we made a film about a guy whom the system said was schizophrenic, and he said, "No, I've been cursed by an extraterrestrial demon," and he believed that. And so, why is his idea different, better, worse than the other? Right? I don't know. Um,
What was the name of the film, David?
it was called the Mars Project.
Is it available?
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Tell a little bit about the
Yeah.
Mars Project.
Well, here's how the Mars Project happened, and I think this is cool. Um, so I'm teaching a class in the history of madness, and one of my students is a filmmaker, and so for his project, he submits a short video about um, the man who is in fact a rapper uh, who has been cursed, right? And I get it. I look at it. I say, wow, this is really terrific. I said, you should do something with this, right? So he and I and a young woman we work with, a teaching assistant, um, and other people put together this film and called the Mars Project. And there's a website called the Mars Project, I believe. And I then took the wrapper to some other classes I teach at the community college um, to do a story about what he was up to, and they thought it was, wow, this is way cool, right? And so, uh, yeah, the Mars Project, and
So,
you can, I think you can, particularly if you make something that's accessible to people, you can get them thinking differently, and we were able to get um, two psychiatrists to be in this film to talk about their point of view, and another a teacher whose his book was about. Do you know what a community treatment order is?
no, I don't know what a community
Oh,
treatment
okay.
order is. Is that like is that I'll guess is it something that's court ordered?
Well, it can be, yeah. No, but what the order is, so Jason, you can go and live at home, but you have to take your Aldo, and I'm
Oh,
going to
yeah.
come and see you every Tuesday and see if you did.
Don't they call that Rogers Law in the United States?
Maybe, yeah. And if you didn't, they can take you to the hospital.
Yeah.
So we call it a leash law, but and we have one in Ontario like that, and we of course fought it and we lost that one.
Now the Rogers Law, the leash law only, or David's or leash law, Rogers Law, whatever you want to call it, that only happens when someone has commits a criminal offense, right?
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah,
know.
it's
I'm guessing.
different for
I'm
us.
guessing. You know better than I do. I'm literally just pontificating if that's right or not.
Okay. Yeah.
Surmising, maybe that's the question. Is that what it is, or can someone be first offense?
No,
First offense,
the
first
way
person.
it works normally is that this is somebody who's had a lot of contact with the mental health system, and they want to discharge him, and so they say, okay, you sign this consent, and then he goes home, and then the assertive community treatment team comes to his door to see if he's complying. And if
Wow.
he, and in fact, I know you have this in the US because I heard David Oakes talk about it one day from Mind Freedom in, you know where it is,
Mind
Eugene,
Freedom
Oregon.
International in Eugene, Oregon. Right, right,
Yeah.
right, right, right. Yeah, I mean, I know this is something that happens. Isn't this a barrier to people's well-being?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Because isn't sometimes the goal of psychiatric medications, which I've tried and failed, is to actually lower and get on the most necessary, or if not any dose whatsoever?
You would hope so.
And if you have a Rogers Law order, doesn't that mean you just can't get off any meds and you
Yeah,
have
I
to?
don't know. I don't know how your order works. I know how
Yeah,
ours works
I
because
guess I
I
guess I guess
studied it.
I guess it's your law, and I don't know that much about Rogers Law, so maybe I should do some more research, have
Uh,
someone on the show, or do a 12-ish minute podcast about it, because I think it's fascinating.
it's quite a common device, and
Yeah,
it in theory it allows people to be in the community, right, and not in a hospital.
can those
And of
leash
course,
laws
what
be
they
removed, David?
sorry.
Can those leash laws be removed?
Oh yeah, you have to change the laws.
No, no, no,
Which
no. Like, can someone,
oh, I
they get a
see.
leash law? Can they somehow get it removed?
Yeah, I don't know. I
Oh
don't know.
wow, that's
Yeah,
that's so interesting.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. A leash law is a community treatment order. Same thing. It's just it's just a street description of it. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. But I think you'll like this story.
Well, let's hear
So
it.
In Toronto recently, the city council was debating crisis response. This is people in crisis. What do you do? And some of us think that what you do is not send the cops. Do not send the cops. And somebody talked about an approach in Eugene, Oregon. It's called something that I forget. And they were all very big on this as the way to do it, which as far as I understand it is you're in crisis, you call or somebody calls, and a peer and a mental health worker respond to your crisis, and nobody has a gun. It's okay. All right. So I called Mind Freedom up because they are in the same place as this program. And I said, so how is it? And they said, well, they don't treat the peers very well. And I thought, oh, yeah, well, I've heard that before. So, and so I said, oh, when they were doing something about it, the Mind Freedom was sort of running training programs to help the mental health professionals be nicer to the peers. I thought, well, good for you. But my view is that we have had a program in the city where a police officer and a psychiatric nurse respond, and the people who use the service or have used the service say, well, there's two things wrong with it. One is the cop and the other is the nurse. So we actually do have a crisis service, which uses only people with mental health history. No mental health workers, no cops, no guns, just a guy who's been where you've been. And it's very successful.
And it's so effective, I'm sure.
It's effective. And however, there are one hell of a lot of people in crisis. And it's kind of scary to think that the cops responded to 30,000 crisis calls last year.
Oh,
30,000 people. And, you know, every now and then they shoot one, right? And usually because they've screwed up in some way, right? Yeah.
Lifted their hands or something, or did
something.
Oh,
and when they shoot them, the dead people tend to be people of color. Yeah. It's a sad thing, you know, it's still there. People of color. Never mind.
And is this widespread in Canada? I know this is definitely something that happens in America for sure. The George Floyd tragedy that happened and countless others.
Well, when I was on council in the early 80s, there were 8 people shot by the police and 7 of them were black. So that tells you something. We made a film about that. It's called Crisis Call.
Crisis Call. Got it.
Crisis Call. And the director of the film, oh my God, what is her name? Laura Sky, S-K-Y, like Sky. It'd be an interesting film for you to watch. And I was a consultant on that film. And it has lots of parts to it because it also deals with Aboriginal people.
Which is a big thing in Canada. Indigenous rights are being there's a lot of things happening in Canada right now that are related to Indigenous rights.
That's right. It's true. And I mean, what worries me is that it needs to be action as well as talk, right? And one of the jobs I did when I was in politics was I went to the Northern Reserves on James Bay. And they're all fly-in reserves, and because I was the health critic, and man, was it they were so underserviced. It was terrible. And how about this? A 15-year-old girl gets pregnant, and they send her 1,000 miles away from home to have her baby.
Oh my God.
How awful is that? It's a shame. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. David, I really want to appreciate so much. Your knowledge alone could fill up many podcasts. I understand that there's a lot going on right now in the world. Let me ask you two questions to wrap
Okay.
this up. And thank you so much for your time. One, what is parting words, or what is one thing that you want to impart on the audience of Oddball Show that we could take with us to grow from?
Well, I believe that it is possible to make change, and I believe that people with mental health uh, histories have lots of skills, especially if they get a chance to use them. And I think things are going to be made better. Um, I I can well let me just add this one little story here. Um, so um, in terms of bad studies, not all of the people involved have themselves a mental health history. Some of them have well, they what they are is allies, and they get it, and we call them mad positive. And I think the number of mad positive people is growing, and that's a great sign.
Add positive.
Mad positive.
And
Yeah.
last question, David. Thank you. I feel blessed to just be to hear from you today. What is one book that you would recommend to the audience that you would love more than anything for every single person in the world to read?
Um, all right. the the author is Persimmon Blackbridge, and the book is called Sunnybrook, all one word, Sunnybrook, comma, a true story with lies. And Persimmon is this dynamite person who is a person with mental health issues and others. And a lot of she's done illustrations for the book, and it's just great. I love that book. That's the book I recommend.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David.
Okay.
David Reville, it's seriously been a pleasure to have you on Oddball Show. You're such a dynamic person. You are a major survivor and not only survivor, conqueror. Just a, you know what? I consider you a friend, David. Thank you for being on the show. I'm just delighted that you took the time. I hope you're well. Be well, my friend, and I hope that we talk soon. Good luck with Mad Studies. I hope that it continues to grow. And thank you so much for being on the show, David.
Thank you, Jason. Been a pleasure.
Really been a pleasure. Take care, David.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I'm honored. I'm almost tearful to have been able to interview David Reville today. I think that was an amazing interview. That man has seen the world and is humble about it, I feel, knows so much. And just the way that he was able to impart all that knowledge to me And hopefully my listeners, I hope that you got something out of this. I certainly did. Seriously, thank you so much, David Reville. Oddball Show is brought to you by the 501c3 mental health advocacy organization, Oddball Foundation. I am the president of Oddball Foundation. Our goal is to find people like David Reville to tell the stories, not only of what is going on, but what has gone on and what can be improved within the mental health system. And I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to interview David Reville. My name is Jason Wright. This has been Oddball Show. I hope you're well. Today, I'd like you all to practice some gratitude that you can listen to this podcast, or if it's on YouTube, that you can view it, that you, that if you can't view it, at least your heart is beating. And if your heart isn't beating, I don't know if your heart isn't beating, but gratitude, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what I was doing with that heart is beating thing, because I guess I was saying because not everyone can read, not everyone can see, and not everyone can hear. And if you can see or hear, you are grateful. I mean, I am grateful. But I guess if your heart is still beating, there's gratitude in there somewhere. My name is Jason Wright. This has been Oddball Show. Please consider donating, subscribing, learning more about Oddball Foundation and its mission. Check out YouTube to learn more about what videos we have. There's some polar opposites to this podcast, which is The Week That Was, which is a much more lighthearted and fun show. And then we also have a Mental Health in Minutes that look out for that. There's going to be a lot more coming from the Mental Health in Minutes. Some stories coming up that are going to blow your minds. And also, I want to shout out the members of Oddball Foundation and the hard work they're doing. And also, you're going to hear some different voices, because I have a voice, and so do so many other people, and you will hear them on Oddball Show. My name is Jason Wright. Be well and read a book. Read 2 books. Bye.
If you liked what you heard in this episode, learned something new, and want to stay up to date on what's going on with Oddball Show, please consider liking this episode and leaving a review. Subscribe to Oddball Show on YouTube, Buzzsprout, or wherever you get your podcasts. And check out oddballmagazine.org for more fascinating stories, poetry, and art. Thanks for listening.